Brigadier A. Gordon Rowell. I have to read this, Gordon. A.O. CBE ED MDS Sydney DDS Northwestern FRACDS FRACDS. Hey, I said FRACDS, didn't I? You got it down here twice. FDSRCS England FACD MICD and FADI. I'm not going to ask you what all of those stand for, Gordon, but you are a man of many, many titles and a man of distinction in dentistry internationally. And I want to welcome you to the United States and to have this opportunity to sit and just chat with you for a while and kind of dig into your background and see what you've done that has made you such an outstanding, I won't say character, I won't do it, but an outstanding individual. According to your biographical sketch and your curriculum vitae, you were born in New South Wales, Sydney, Australia. And I'd like to hear just a little of your background, your family, and how you got started in the progression to where you are now. Tell me about some of your early life, your early boyhood.
Well, with the birthday of 1913, it put me pretty close to First World War. And I still have very keen subjects which pop into my mind as to what happened when the First World War ended. And there was just as much jubilation then as there was when the Second World War ended. Well, my father was a dentist, and my family were very religiously inclined. So I grew up in what is loosely called a Christian home, which did have some effect on my lifestyle and on what I did subsequently. I went to school like other children do. Eventually was admitted to the university, but I hadn't always planned to be a dentist.
Oh. Mm-hmm.
I was very interested in the work that had been done in Africa by Schweitzer, and for some reason or other in my youthful exuberance thought it mightn't be a bad idea to be a medical missionary. Uh-huh. And although some of my class of friends might chuckle a little bit when they hear that.
Well, I think you're a missionary anyway. Go ahead.
So I planned to do medicine and actually signed up at the university to do medicine. And after I had, my father, who had never tried to pressure me in any way, suggested to me that I might like to think of doing dentistry, and wondered why I hadn't thought of that before. So I thought about it, and the prospects of working with him and taking over from him in the long distant future were attractive to me. So I changed, and I did a dental course and have never regretted for 1 minute the decision that I took at that time. Then I had an interesting undergraduate period with the help of a lot of very wonderful faculty men. Of course, there were, in those days, very few people in a faculty. There were only 28 of us altogether, and that was the biggest one since the First World War. And I graduated with honours at the head of the honours list and won a few prizes, and that was my undergraduate days.
Did you have brothers and sisters, Gordon?
Yes, I had one brother and one sister, and they grew up in their own particular lifestyle, and because of the position in which I was placed during the war and subsequently, their contact was relatively minimum. But I was very close to my sister for many years. My brother came to the United States to do some training. He wasn't a dentist, and we saw less and less of each other for quite a while, so that it wasn't what you'd call a tight family group, but a loose family group.
We understand. You mentioned that you did go to Sydney, University of Sydney, for your dental training, and while you were there, and I think upon graduation, when you got your bachelor's, I believe they call it in Australia, Bachelor's of Dental Science, or Bachelor...
Dental Surgery.
Dental Surgery, excuse me. You were at the top of the class and received a very special award, I believe. What was that that brought you to the United States?
In those days, Northwestern University, through the benefit of certain grants that had been made available to them, formed a Northwestern Scholarship. And they provided schooling at Northwestern for one student from Melbourne and Sydney University each year, one from London, one from Canada, Hawaii, which didn't belong to the United States in those days, South America, Mexico, New Zealand, and these scholarships were offered to candidates who were selected by the either Senate or similar group in each university. You had to get your way there and keep yourself while you were there, but all school fees were paid. I was one of the first group ever to do a thesis as part of the DDS requirements, and they even paid for all the microscopic photography, everything that went with the preparation of the thesis, and produced it for me as part of the scholarship. It was wonderful. All library facilities, all equipment, all instruments were provided for me during my stay. And of course a fantastic faculty in those days whose name were household words in any dental family.
Yeah. You're one of the so-called largest international alumni members of the Northwestern University, and that's probably why they have such a large international alumni.
Well, I think this is very true. Dean Black and Charles Freeman, his assistant at Northwestern, to me made one of the most potent decisions that any faculty man could have, that is how to spend finance. They could have built a new department, refurbished old ones, bought new equipment, but they decided they'd spend their money on people. And this is probably one of the most humanitarian things done at international level in dentistry. And as you've just said, it created an alumni abroad which is unrivaled by any other school in any part of the world. And you can't go anywhere in the modern world where there is just a Northwestern graduate.
You run into them every place. After you left Northwestern, you did receive your DDS degree there. You toured a little before you returned back to Australia, I understand. Tell us a little about your early years before you met some lovely person. I mean, married her.
Well, there were a group of us left Sydney in the old steamship Monterey, which was sunk during the war. And we had a most enjoyable trip to the States, and having arrived, we decided we'd, instead of training it across to Chicago, we'd get a car. So we looked at the advertisements in the Sunday paper, and we picked a car that was the one that was owned by two little old ladies who had never driven more than 30 miles an hour and only used it to go to church on Sunday. This is literally the car we bought. And we drove that eventually for over 20,000 miles before we eventually disposed of it. And the sum total on repair facilities was $6.50 plus 10 cents for somebody who'd stolen the cap off the petrol tank. And we even got a spare tyre of somebody's car they were changing all around. That was $25 cents. And that's not bad to buy a brand new tyre for 25 cents. Never been on the road. But we did the whole of the West Coast. It took us 6,000 miles to get to Chicago, and that's the long way round. Yes. But it whetted our appetite. So after graduation, there were only two of us involved. The others couldn't join us. And we went up to Minnesota. The other Australian student had an aunt who was married to Henri Verbruggen, the conductor of the Philharmonic Orchestra. And so we went up to Minneapolis to see his aunt, and then went out to the west through South Dakota and into Yellowstone and up into Canada and down the west coast. This was just to get to San Francisco. Sure. And after we'd been to San Francisco, we went down to LA to see some old friends there, and then back across the Santa Fe Trail and back up to Northwestern to say goodbye, then up to Canada and across to the East Coast and down to Washington. And that's what gave us the bug for travel, I'm afraid.
Kind of a long way to get back to the East Coast, wasn't it?
It was a fantastic
Great
holiday, and of course the lad with whom I was travelling, he got tired of travelling and wanted to come home, so I had 6 weeks left to go, so I did a cook's tour of Europe, and that whetted my appetite to see more of Europe, which we did at a later date, thank God.
Great. And after you had your travel out of your system, you returned to Australia, to Orange, I believe.
That's right. I wouldn't say out of my system, but
well, I mean,
temporarily suppressed.
I mean, out of money or something. You were out of something. You're ready to go to work.
I had a very kind uncle who lent me the money to do the travelling, and he was repaid very rapidly once I got into practice, but he was kind enough to help me out for a start, rather than allow me to come back. Right. My father wanted me to go into practice with him, but I felt that it really, in deference to his patience, that I should do some practice in what we call the bush, in the country area. So I went to Orange, which is about 135 miles west of Sydney, with a wonderful practitioner who taught me more about business administration than I'd ever learnt at school or from books. And had it not been for the war, I could have still been there. But I spent 3 very, very interesting years, probably the 3 happiest years of my professional activity, because in the country those days you had to be everything, an orthodontist, a periodontist, an oral surgery, and I'd been trained in specific fields that were not available to some of the local people, so I was helping out with some of the more advanced problems locally, and of course that did me a lot of good by making me learn a tremendous amount very quickly. I became involved in the local community with debating and Boy Scouting and tennis, what have you, and School of Arts. Don't know what they call that in the United States, but it...
You're such a shy type individual, I'm surprised you got into debating.
Debating's a very good thing, and
yes,
I've never been sorry for the time I spent on that, because it does allow you to concentrate your thoughts on a particular subject and to put a plan of approach at any particular time, and it's been proved very valuable.
Good background, you bet. It sure was. Then it seems that your life was kind of interrupted abruptly, but due to no fault of your own. Along came about 1939, and hostilities were beginning to crop up in the world, and you were called upon, I believe.
Well, I was one of the ones that volunteered to go. I wasn't dragged in.
No.
I volunteered to go, and I enlisted in 1939, and I spent 2,627 days. That's 7 years and 3 months at a quick guess.
Counted every one of them.
Counted every one, even the hours and minutes. But a tremendously formative part of my life, and I was given great responsibility for a young man, which was character building and very helpful to me, and I learnt many skills which proved of great value later. Added to which I saw some more of the world. We got to Egypt and Palestine and Syria, Lebanon, and then back to Australia, then up to Papua New Guinea, and finished the war in Bougainville before coming back to Australia to do a lot of winding up administrative work in Australia.
Now, during the beginning of the years that you were in the military, were you practicing military installations or in the field, or various and sundry things, or administrative? Or?
My first posting, and the whole time I was in the Middle East, was as a dental officer with a field ambulance. And of course, you spill over a little bit into the medical field when you a practical field medical unit. And the constitution of a field ambulance doesn't provide for an adjutant in those days, and but there is a need for an adjutant, so that CO said, all right, you're the adjutant. So I suddenly became an adjutant, security officer, and the dental officer as well. And so, but my work was mainly purely in the dental field. Came back to Australia and transferred to a general hospital again as a dentist with a rise in rank to major. And then I became involved with administration quite a bit, and but I always insisted that some of my time was spent doing clinical dentistry right up until the time that I departed, except probably for the last year, where the the load was so great I just didn't have the time to do any clinical work.
Earlier during this time, were you kind of leading toward prosthodontics rather than? Well, I know
yes, I had. It is very interesting. The officer under whom I served at Eastern Command and then at Second Army Headquarters was a Colonel Marshall, and he was my teacher in prosthetic dentistry at University of Sydney during my undergraduate days. And working closely with him, he had always hoped that one day I would take over his post at the university as a part-time teacher in prosthetics, and prophetically this did happen, and eventually on return from the Middle East, and before I was out of the army even, I was given time off to go onto the teaching faculty in about 46, and I didn't get out till into 47. And December of last year I completed 42 unbroken years of teaching in prosthetic dentistry, so great. It was very valuable.
Did you get associated with the University of Sydney prior to your release from active duty, let's put it that way?
Yes, they gave me special privileges to spend a few half days a week on the teaching staff, because a tremendous number of students had entered the university to do dentistry, and without the assistance that came from a number of ex-serving dental officers who were all highly qualified with higher degrees, and without their part-time assistance it could have never occurred. So it was very valuable to the students, and I think those who came in and did this part-time training, sometimes up to 5 half days a week, which is a long time out of your practice, just to help these young fellows graduate. And I thought it was onerous on them, but rewarding in its own right.
And also during this time, did you found time to get your master's in dental surgery?
Yes, I did that in 1947, and you did make one point a little bit earlier. You graduate in the United States and in South Africa and in Canada with the Doctor of Dental Surgery.
Yes.
We are tied to the old English system, where everybody that graduates initially is a baccalaureate, so that you graduate Bachelor of Arts or Bachelor of Dental Surgery, Bachelor of Medicine or Bachelor of Surgery, and then you go on to a higher degree. You can have your master's degree, and then a Doctor of Philosophy and a Doctor of Dental Science if you want to go that far. But those degrees, I'd almost say purely academic. They're research degrees, not a practical one. The master's degree is the highest one you can do from a practical point of view. And of course that led a few of us to get involved with something else which gave me a great amount of satisfaction. That was the establishment of what is now known as the Royal Australasian College of Dental Surgeons. It wasn't that then, it was the Australian College of Dental Surgeons, and we had to call it dental surgeons. I wanted to call it dentist, but had we done that, you'd have graduated FACD, and everybody thought we were all fellows of the American college. So we had to put surgeons on the end, but of course when eventually we got the royal title, it didn't matter whether you had an S on the end or not. But there was a group of us, the Dean of the Faculty and Dr. Robert Harris, now Dr. Robert Harris, who was the head of the Institute of Dental Research and the first editor of the Australian Dental Journal, and I discussed a topic which is very dear to our heart. In those days, if you wanted to get a higher degree, you virtually had to give up practice and come back to the university for at least 2 years. And after the time that these fellows had sacrificed on behalf of their country, we felt it inopportune that they should be required to give up another couple of years, and if there could be some mechanism by which they could study while still in practice, even taking time out, to acquire additional knowledge and to attain a degree of excellence which could be rewarded by a fellowship, that this could possibly be done. In 1947, in England, the Royal College of Surgeons instituted a faculty of dental surgery of the Royal College. And a large number of Australians who went to the United Kingdom to practice after graduation did their fellowship in dental surgery. That's FDSRCS, England. And there's also in Scotland and in Ireland. Not of Ireland, but in Ireland.
In Ireland.
And we felt that it's totally inappropriate that one should have to go to England to do this extra work. So we worked towards the idea of establishing a college in Australia. I just happened to be the Vice President of the Australian Dental Association at the time. So I wrote a letter to the President, later Sir Kenneth Adamson, and pointing out this point of view and asking would the association consider engaging in a discussion with the Royal College of Surgeons of Australasia as to whether they would have a faculty of dental surgery with them, just as in England they'd had the Royal College of Surgeons that had a faculty of dental surgery. And discussions went on at that level. The Australian Dental Association agreed in principle to the idea, and it should never be forgotten that it was the Australian Dental Association that was the initiating instrumentality for the formation of the college. And fortunately I had a foot in both camps and could exercise a little bit of influence, and it looked as though this was going to be a fait accompli until there were some awkward remarks made by the then President, which to me could only be interpreted that if the dentists were to contribute in quite considerably towards a fundraising scheme that they were having, they could probably view our case a little bit more favourably. So I went back very heatedly after this, and I said, it'll be over my dead body if Australia ever has a faculty of dental surgery within the college and people can say we bought our way into it. So I had a resolution passed in the Federal Council that we make no further approaches to the College of Surgeons and that we start our own college. They agreed with this. They appointed me to be chairman of an investigating committee, and we looked at this for many years. And eventually, in 1965, approval was given for us to form an Australian College of Dentists, which we did. We circularised all the people in Australia and New Zealand who had higher qualifications to see if they would care to come in as inaugural fellows and get the college started before we got to the stage of examinations. And actually, during my term of I did an inaugural presidency and then stood for election and became the first president. And before I handed over to Sir Kenneth Adamson, who was following me, we'd had a convocation, conducted our first examinations because everything was in order before we started. And it's been tremendously successful with over 600 fellows. And of course the inaugural fellows are dropping by the wayside now, but they gave us their support. When I say dropping by, falling off the perch or any other way you can talk about passing on to another world. But it did give us the opportunity to form a very firm and safe financial background on which we could build the college as it is now, where you can only become a fellow of the college except in rare instances without doing examinations. So everybody does their examination for entrance to the college, and it's a primary examination and a final examination, very rigid. We even now have diploma courses for specialisation, which is the highest level you can reach by examination in Australia for any specialty. And the Queen was good enough to lend her name to the college, so it's now the Royal Australasian College of Dental Surgeons. And I have retired from the board, having served my appropriate period on the board, and now look at things from the sidelines with not too many comments, I hope.
Hope for favourable comments. Just a little interjection here, because we have been using Australia and Australasian, and I noticed there's been some changes in the names of groups in your part of the world, and just a little background on why that happened.
Well, when you're starting off a new group, it's difficult enough to do it in your own country, let alone trying to involve other countries. So although we were very happy to have New Zealanders join our Australian college at that stage, we felt it would inappropriate at that particular time to have a name which indicated that there were others involved than just Australians. But it's a large area. There are not a tremendous number of people realise that Australia is almost as big as the United States, and even with a tremendous growth in population since the war, it's grown in a population from 7 million to about 14 million, and that's not many people, over a country of over 6 million square kilometres. It's a big country, and this makes administration difficulty, but having firmly established ourselves an Australian entity, we wish to do the compliment of including the New Zealanders, people from Papua New Guinea and other close islands to Australia, and that includes the term Australasia. And when you get to Australasia, it means it's not purely Australian. And in fact, the Royal Australasian College of Dental Surgeons has just concluded a period where they had a New Zealander who was president of the college, Professor Kings from New Zealand. So we shared around.
That's great. That's good. While you were in doing your military service before you got out, I noticed in your CV that there was some mention about fluoridation in areas that the military was stationed that they couldn't utilize local water supplies, and you played a part in that with the military.
Well, for my crimes, at one stage I was made the director of dental services. This was post-war. I'll go back a little bit. When I was released from the services in 1947, I thought, well, that's the Army, but I remained on the reserve and could be called up any time they wished to. And about 1960, I was approached by the director of dental services and asked would I be happy to serve on his team as a consultant prosthodontist. So I said yes, I'd be happy to do that. I'd always complained about the facilities available for people doing prosthetic dentistry, and if the opportunity was given to me to do something about it and I turned it down, then I've been a hound dog. So I took that on. I did that for 4 years, and then the time came for the appointment of a director, and of course they don't just select one name and look at that. They have to have a panel. And he asked me, would I allow my name to be put forward on a short list? So I said, well, I don't mind making up a short list, because I knew there was no chance of me being made director, because there are other people just clawing to get the job. But I don't know what happened, but when it all came through the wash, I finished up by being director. And it was during that time that I was given some wonderful opportunities. I did that for 7 years. And during that time, I was given some wonderful opportunities to introduce a lot of new ideas into the services. One was to permit serving officers to do higher degrees while they were still in the service, taking master's degrees, paid for by the services, and come back into the service, of course, and give the advantage of the knowledge that they'd gained. We built new dental centres the whole way through Australia and New Guinea. We had an undergraduate training scheme where we would actually take over the cost of education of dental students in their penultimate year or even final year, and they would have to give us a return of the period we trained them for, plus a prescribed number of years in return for that help, and they were employed as lieutenants and received appropriate pay and became captains on graduation. And then it was very interesting how we were able to get this postgraduate qualification, because unfortunately my predecessor wasn't very keen on it. And so there was a paper in existence which really spoke against it, and of course to overcome that's quite a thing, as you know. So I eventually got down to discuss it with the Adjutant General, and he said, well, why do you really need this? And I said, well, I would hope to think that all your officers in the Army just didn't do their what I consider undergraduate training at the military college, and learn nothing more about the services from there on. And staff college would mean nothing at all. Why would you need to do staff college work if you knew it all? He said, well, I can understand that. And I said, well, it's exactly the same with the dentist. He does his basic degree, he can do all the normal things that come up, but he's got to learn a great deal more, and he should be given an opportunity to advance himself clinically and scientifically, and as well as this, to provide an incentive for him to stay in the services and to provide good treatment. And he said, well, I can see that. And he said, well, why don't you put a paper up on it? I said, I have, sir. I wouldn't mind betting it's in your drawer. And believe it or not, with some prior knowledge, I knew he had it there. Yeah. So he pulled the drawer out and got this thing out, and he wrote, do something about this, A.L. MacDonald, and that's how we got it. And it just, but unfortunately, the personal contact that we had then, because we all served together, we knew each other so well, that's gone. And because dentistry now is being subjugated quite a bit in the services and in other places, civilian-wise, and faculties being downgraded. I even notice you're losing 3 dental skills or undergraduate skills in the United States, and 3 very good ones at that.
Yeah, we're having our problems. Is there anything else in your military? You have such a vast experience in your military that doesn't necessarily directly toward military, but it happened while you were in the inactive part of your military life. It's extended over, I don't know how many years, a good number of years, and just recently, not recently, but, well, you did retire last year, not from the military, but you retired from practice, I believe, after about 50 years, a young man of your years. But during your military life, you did receive many outstanding honors, and 1 or 2 that come to mind, and I'd like for you to mention. I know the Queen appointed you as her honorary dentist for a number of years. And just these are things, particularly those of us in the United States, we don't understand the royal approach to life in the military or in the civilian life. And Australia's closeness to the Queen and England, mother country. Give us little stories about these things that happened to you, and also becoming a brigadier. That's another one. Very, very, very honored.
Well, I became a brigadier because that was the rank which was had by the director. So I moved straight from lieutenant colonel to brigadier, which
I don't think you strayed.
Which upsets a lot of the permanent army staff, that anybody could go straight from lieutenant colonel to brigadier. But I did that in 1964, and have remained that way since. And you did mention RL when.
Yeah, you can go back and explain all these as we're going.
That means that having retired, they did me the honour of placing me on the retired list, which is a lot of difference to just being retired.
Right.
And if you're placed on the retired list, you're entitled to maintain the rank and the appurtenances that go with that. And so on appropriate occasions, you wear uniform. That's if you can get into it. The federal government asked me on this occasion if I would represent the Department of Health and the dental services at the international meeting on military dentistry, which is being held with the FDI here in Washington this week. And so I said yes, and then got out my uniform to see whether it was appropriate to wear it or not, and put it back very quickly. So I'll be attending in civilian clothes.
Yes.
But the Queen has always have her equerries no matter where she goes, and Australia, like other countries, have people appointed to be her honorary staff. She is the one that has the right of say as to whomsoever shall be appointed to that group of select people, and of course it's done on the nomination of the country concerned. And I was nominated to be a Queen's honorary dental surgeon, or dental surgeon to Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II, which is the full title. And I did that for 9 years, and it was a very, very happy period because whenever the Queen came to Australia, my wife and I were invited to attend functions of a very private nature that she had arranged, and it was nice to be able to visit with them and in the uniform of the day. And I can remember on one day where I had to change the order of the day uniform 3 times before I got to Parliament, Government House. And we had about half an hour's discussion with the Queen and the Duke and with the children, Prince of Wales and so on. We had about half an hour with him and half an hour with Princess Anne. And we just talked like we're talking together here. And I did an unpardonable thing, and I'm afraid I've done this more times than enough in my life. You're not supposed to raise new items of business when you're discussing things with the Queen.
That's difficult for you.
You allow her to just introduce a new theme, and then you permit her to discuss that until that one's exhausted and she introduces a new one. But we'd been very concerned at this time because of the nature of royalty, particularly in her instance, travelling around the world with as little actual bodyguard as she could possibly allow. And I asked her a question which had the effect of putting a proposition to her as did she feel any trepidation through having to be in large crowds, knowing full well that there could somebody in the crowd who was ill-disposed towards her. And she said a remarkable thing to me which made the posing of the question really worthwhile. She said, well, we all have duties, don't we? And if we forsook our duties purely because of inherent dangers, nothing would be done, would it?
That's a great answer.
And frankly, this is her attitude to life, and I felt more proud of myself than ever that I'd asked the question, because I was sure that's what she'd say, but I wanted to hear her say it. So anyhow, we did that, and I'm ashamed to say that our present government in Australia has now eliminated the ideas of personal equerries to the Queen. And we don't know. I was permitted for a year, the whole time I was the Queen's Honorary Dental Surgeon, if you had a letterhead, a personal letterhead, you could put QHDS after your name, which indicated you're the Queen's Honorary Dental Surgeon. And that was quite an honour in itself to be able to do that. And but the present government is against everything to do with knighthoods or anything closely related with the Queen. And I won't say which particular minister was the one that was responsible for this, but I don't hold him in the highest regard. And he has eliminated the Queen's Honorary Dental titles now. And as a matter of fact, when the present Director of Dental Services was appointed, it would be automatic that he'd become the Queen's Honorary Dental Surgeon. And I wrote to him and I put QHDS after his name, and he wrote back and he said, sorry, Gordon, we're not allowed to have this anymore. So we don't have any Queen's Honorary Dental Surgeons anymore.
That's too bad. Which
is a great pity, because it was a great honour, and I thoroughly enjoyed it.
Tell me the little anecdote I heard about when the Queen was in Australia and you had to get the dental clinic in order one weekend.
Well, there are two things about being helpful to the Queen. One is the Queen's Honorary Dental Surgeon title, which is a purely honorary one. It doesn't require any physical effort. You have certain pertinences which go with it, such as subtle changes in uniform, which you use on parade and so forth. But then they have to appoint a dental surgeon in waiting for the Queen and her entourage, wherever she goes, New South Wales or Victoria, somewhere else. And during the time I was Queen's Honorary Dental Surgeon, I was also the dentist in waiting in New South Wales. So I always had to stick around when they were there, so that if anything happened, I could rush in and attempt to do something about it, or find somebody that knew more about it than I did and get them to do it. And I thought I'd like to see the surgery done up even better than it normally is, and seeing that Jean was responsible for ensuring that it maintained the correct standard, it was always pretty good. But we decided we'd get some more spit and polish on the weekend, so I had the cleaner spend a bit of extra time. It was a hot weekend and very, very humid, and I decided I'd pop in on the Sunday to see how it looked. And when I went in, the surgery was a parquetry floor, and to my horror, it looked like the Sahara Desert with sandhills, only in parquetry. And the wood had expanded and broken the contact cement underneath. And of course, where I saw one of these lumps, I just patted it down with my foot, and up came another lump somewhere else. I patted that down, and up came the original lump. And so I thought, what do I do now? So I removed some strategic little sections of parquetry and patted it all down and put a carpet over, and hoped to God, one, that the Queen didn't need my help, and if two, she would not get too upset seeing carpet on the floor and just did clean parquetry. But it was, looking at the time, I thought it was rather tragic, but looking back on it now, I thought just how funny it was.
Yeah, but yeah, I'm sure your heart was beating an extra beat in case the Queen should happen to come by.
I can never describe what I felt when I saw this floor like the Sahara Desert.
I had to have you tell that story because it was the first time you told it. I laugh again because it was so funny. As I say, you've received so many honors. It's just hard to put them all in order, and I think we've touched on the highlights of your military career. If you think of any, there's one little thing I noticed in your CV that you were trying to do and perhaps did do, I don't know, and it wasn't a monumentous thing, but I'm sure it meant a lot to the dental surgeons that were working in the Army, that you instigated or provided or put in air conditioning in the dental clinics.
Oh, yes. It's amazing. They would provide fans which would almost blow you out of the clinic,
right,
but they wouldn't put in air conditioning. And if they put in air conditioning, they'd put in air conditioning so the usable or expendable items in the stores wouldn't go off and have to be replaced. But you couldn't, anybody that was in there looking after it shouldn't be able to get the benefit of the air conditioning. And eventually we said, well, we're sick of patients who want to, in the heat, and it can get very hot in our part of the world in some areas. While we didn't want the patients passing out in the surgery, so they eventually agreed to put air conditioning in the surgery, but then you had to stop there and put a fan in the waiting room because they weren't going to pass out in the waiting room. So I thought this was a lot of nonsense, so we got the Department of Health to make a ruling on it, and in future every dental centre that was built had full air conditioning. As a matter of fact, there was enough air conditioning in a dental unit to do a whole warship like the QE2. It was incredible.
Wow.
But I think anything that would make it easier for troops to undergo dental treatment, and anything to permit the officers to do it in a more conditioned way where they were at ease, I think is good for the service, good for the patients, and good for the operators. So.
You and I both started practicing without the advantages of air conditioning, and it was not too much fun to have the fan and the heat, and being from Oklahoma, we have heat, and so the air conditioning was a great advent to the dental office.
Well, in the morning now, because I don't have to rush off to the office, I can turn on and see what the temperature is going to be, and I notice orange, where the temperature may be anything from 3 degrees overnight to about 12 degrees, this is Fahrenheit of course, or Celsius, during the day, Celsius rather, not Fahrenheit, and I think, God, did I ever live in orange under those conditions? Right. Because another little interesting item, I was the first president of the Canobbler Ski Club.
The what?
The Canobbler Ski Club.
Okay, ski club.
Yeah.
Okay.
Matter of fact, I'm very partial to skiing. I met my wife skiing. Jean and I went to Kosciuszko at the same time, and that was that. And so we've only been married 46 years, so we're getting used to each other now. And a very wonderful 46 years they were too. But during the, there's a large mountain behind Orange Town called Mount Canobbler's, and during the Depression they got a large number of unemployed people, and they put in a ski run on the western slopes at a cost of £400, which was a fortune in those days. And So the proprietor of the hotel in Orange, New Canobolas Hotel in Orange, used to be the manager at Kosciuszko, which was then our mountain ski resort in New South Wales. And he came to manage the hotel in Orange, and his two sons were great skiers. And we used to buy skis for 5 shillings a pair. That's 50 cents a pair.
Oh, my. And
from Kosciuszko, and we did them up and taught people to ski on grass during the summer. And if we get an overnight fall of snow, we'd put off the first couple of patients to a later point in the day,
sure,
fill the boot of the car with skis and rush up and have a couple of hours skiing up on the mountain.
That's great.
So we started this club, and unfortunately young Speed was killed during the war, and the club was never resurrected, and the trees grew back, and nobody had the money to clear the slope, so it's gone. So I was the one and only president of the Orange Ski Club.
Well, that's a highlight, though, along the skiing. Gordon, we're going to stop right here for a moment and break, and we'll relax a little bit, and they'll change all the tapes and get ready to go for the second half.
Thank you,
You didn't
Bill.
realize an hour had gone by, did you?
No, has it? Good God.
Well, we've been talking considerably about your military career and your early education, and we made one small reference to a very lovely person that you're married to, and one that I know and think very highly of, Jean, your wife. Where did you all meet, anyway? You mentioned something about skiing.
Well, Jean and I decided we'd have a skiing holiday at the same time. Not a collective decision, I can assure you. She had her own group of friends with whom she went skiing, and I went by myself, and I noticed this rather lovely girl who I enjoyed talking with and skiing with and dancing with at night time, and she lived in the city and I was still in Orange, and I asked her would she care to go out with me some evening when I was down from Orange, and she said yes, she'd fit me in with her large group of friends. And so we became very close, and before I went to the war, I went to ask her father for her hand in marriage. I wanted more than a hand, mind you, but I had to ask him because that was the thing to do. And I remember he was, I was staying at Jean's place for the weekend, and he was shaving, so my permission to marry Jean was given in the bathroom. However, he insisted that she was too young to be married at that stage, and as long as I didn't want to marry her tomorrow, to be all right with him. So, so I went to the war, and I was one of the number of people who had the notion that you shouldn't get married before you went away, because you didn't know whether you were going to come home, if you did come home, a whole man or a half man, and who wants to be married for the rest of their life or hooked up with the rest of their life with somebody who's only a half man. And so very stupidly I put off the idea of marriage at that stage till I came back. But when we came back from the Middle East in 1942, that was long enough, so we decided we'd get married. So we became married, and Jean was with me for a little while before I was moved again out of Australia, and about 1945, at the end of the war, we were still in Bougainville, and then that was VP Day. And then we came back to Australia, and I still remained in the army until March 1947. But then we had these 3 lovely children, and they grew up and did their own thing. The eldest one became a dentist at Sydney University. He graduated with honours. He went to Northwestern, and he came back, and I don't know whether he was trying to emulate me or not, or whether he still had the urge to go into the army, but he joined the army, went to Vietnam, came back and remained in the services, and at the moment he's Staff Officer 1, that's a Lieutenant Colonel at the 2nd Military District. That's the area that runs the whole of New South Wales, and he's there. So that he's married to a nurse, and they weren't going to have any children, so they started off by having twins. Who are now 6 years old and beautiful children, and just before we came away this time, we spent some time with them in Queensland, and they're 2 lovely little twins. And then the next one was Clive, and he's a Bachelor of Architecture from Sydney University. And he's a keen photographer, and he's been involved in art in many ways, particularly in television, producing television backgrounds and screening and ads and all this sort of thing. And believe it or not, he's now back into full-time architecture.
Well, wonderful.
And which we're very happy about. And then our daughter is married to a Qantas captain, and they have 2 children, and the elder one is at a very good school. Both of them are extremely good schools, and the young one is one of the brightest young children I have ever met. Now, I'm not claiming any degree of responsibility for this.
I understand that.
You can understand that.
Yes, surely.
But she's such an artistic thing. It doesn't matter what she does, whether it's drawing a picture or whether it's writing a poem. She read us a poem the other night out of a little book in which she's written quite a number of poems, and you know, almost brought the tears to your eyes to see a child of that age, and she's only 12, with the wealth of understanding of life and human nature just into this. It wasn't just a little limerick type of thing, it was a full-blown poem. And we're very proud of the fact that as part of, you've heard of our 200 years bicentennial deal that's going on for the whole of this year. And one of the projects that they had was to invite outstanding children to write something or to compose something or to draw something with a view to selecting 250 of the best in Australia to go into this production which the government was producing. And there were 3,500 entrants, and Kate was one of them, and she was selected. So we're very proud of young Kate.
Wonderful.
And she's just a delightful young girl, and it doesn't matter what she does, she'll do it well. So that's our family.
It's a wonderful family. I know
It's
that
nice
you're
to have
proud
it.
of all of them. And I know they're just as proud of you, as we all
Well,
are.
I would hope so.
Well, as long as they don't catch you in some of the situations that I've caught you, that's different. We're going to change gear a little bit here, Gordon, and talk about some things in the profession as compared to today and yesteryear, and some of the things that are facing us today that we didn't have to be concerned with a number of years ago. But let's start off with your viewpoint of the dentist of today as compared to the dentist in your early part of your practice and my practice. Just your feeling about this.
Well, I would say the young dentist these days has tremendous advantage over what we had in our day when we became dentists. The proficiency, the training methods, the facilities available for teaching, instrumentation, materials, all vastly improved. But I haven't seen one of them yet that could do a large amalgam filling as well as Miles Markley, who you just mentioned a moment ago, or a gold foil filling, as well as Jim Finetti, who at well over 70 is going up to UCLA once a week to teach a gold foil clinic, how to do things, manipulative dexterity and how to use your hands properly. So that although we have the tremendous advantages of materials and equipment, the basic ability to do things, I don't think within the individual is any better now than it was then.
Right.
But what I do find is the attitudes have changed a great deal, and there's a great deal of materialism which didn't appear to be around when I was a young student. For instance, I don't know how many of my confreres, and including myself, would have sat down and contemplated in the middle of a course, why are we doing dentistry? What part of dentistry would give us the greatest return for the minimum amount of work? Right. Now, what have I got to do to buy a house within the first year and a boat before I've even got the house finished? Right. And I'm not going to work on a Saturday, and night works out. When I started dentistry at Orange, I worked 3 nights a week and Saturday up till 2 o'clock and thought it was normal. Mm-hmm. And it didn't fuss me. I still had time to live and enjoy life. Right. And it worries me a little bit when I see the attitude of some of the young fellows that feel that the world owes them a living. And we see after the World War just what happens to countries for a number of years where everybody in the country feels the world owes them a living. Right. And I don't denigrate the youth of today at all. I think the youth today has great prospects. But I do denigrate some of the leadership that some of the members of our profession are giving. And of course, I'm very upset about government and some of the people who are in government who have got an idea that if you can dampen down the enthusiasm of the individual a little bit, don't make him learn quite so much. Bring somebody along who doesn't know all that, so they don't want to be paid for what they don't know, and the public will get a cheaper service, and that's exactly what they will get. They'll get a cheaper service, but it won't be a service at all. Right. And I can see, not only in more than one country, I can see this happening all around the English-speaking world. I can't speak for the others because I can't communicate with them. But I can see where, for the sake of money, that you get such a stupid suggestion by a politician, as they have at the moment in New Zealand, where they deregulate dentistry. And the fella that sells me a paper could set himself up as a dentist as long as he didn't give anybody an injection and as long as he doesn't call himself a dentist. Oh. Now that's what they're trying to work to, and these people are stupid enough to think that that's good for the community. Mm. Now, so it's not coming from the profession, it's being heaped on the profession by people, do-gooders, who think that by reducing standards, not requiring people to know so much, that you will open up the gates for competition, and competition always leads to something bigger, brighter and cheaper, not necessarily better. And I blame our own administrators in dentistry for not seeing clearly enough what was happening and raising voices loud and clear and demonstrating what could happen if this thing is proceeded with. I know full well that the Australian Dental Association, the New Zealand Dental Association, the American Dental Association, the FDI have all bought into this argument in New Zealand. I know that. But when were they bought into it? When the ink was nearly dried on the bill.
Too late.
And there should have been, not now, but there should have been, before it got to this stage, a tremendous campaign from the people themselves demanding that they get a better service than what the government's trying to give them. Then I'm very, very concerned about the attitude of some of our young academics who feel that their spiritual home is with medicine rather than with dentistry. And you may or may not know it, but at the moment in Melbourne, Adelaide and Perth in Western Australia, there is every possibility that they will lose their faculties of dentistry, and the faculties of dentistry will become departments of the Faculty of Medicine. Now, that's what we had 50 years ago. And if we haven't learnt enough in 50 years, I wonder what's wrong with a young professional man that allow himself to have his profession so denigrated that he becomes a handmaiden to a medico. You've only got to read the press and see what the public estimation is of medicine and dentistry, and it's far much, the dentistry stands far higher in the applaud and acceptance by the public than does medicine at the moment, because they're very unhappy about noises that the medicos have been made for extra money and extra this and extra that, and we haven't been condemned quite the same degree as that. But to willingly submit to losing a faculty, of course you could argue this all day, and of course what I've said is purely superficial, but it is only an attempt to make a short statement which has very deep depths involved with the thing, and it's got to be argued out. But the thing that annoys me is that there are not enough people standing up and screaming about it.
That's what we find here. And
we've got a lot of dry-fingered dentists. Do you use that term?
We use it wet-fingered and dry-fingered, you bet.
We've got a lot of dry-fingered dentists who've made me very annoyed over the years. As a prosthodontist, I have seen the time developing when there was a greater need for prosthodontic excellence than there's ever needed to be in modern man. People are living longer. If you live longer, you've got to be able to chew longer to live longer.
Right.
Therefore, the problems of treating the geriatric patient are so great that you need a greater amount of expertise than you did when the patient didn't live quite so long and the tissues were more adaptable to the use of the presence of foreign bodies in the oral cavity. But then in Melbourne, they even haven't filled the chair of prosthetic dentistry. They've just lumped it in with conservative dentistry. So they haven't got anybody who can really speak on behalf of prosthetic dentistry. And of course, some of the younger people seem to feel that implantology is the God's given gift to all possibilities, and of course when it fails, the patient has a lot to complain about. But do you have to say to a patient, oh, come in and I'll put some implants in, they won't cost you much, only $4,000 or $5,000 for the bits and pieces, and then we'll make you a denture? Are we going to submit our elderly people to this? And it worries me. You and I and many others were very much in the forefront of the fight for fluoridation.
Right.
I spoke about fluoridation all over the countryside and got people attuned to the idea of having fluoridation. Now I read in the last issue of the newsletter from the American Dental Association that in some areas the fluoridation has reduced dental caries in the up to 17 age group by 50%. We used to be thrilled when we said it was 37% in the good old days. Now it's 50%. But a lot of people say, all right, you don't need to know anything about filling teeth. You don't need to have restorations. You don't need to use metallic inserts in teeth so that they can function. You get a material that'll, you can pop something on it and what you put on it will stick to it like wool to a sheep's back, and you've got no problems. So when you don't have to have what we considered adequate cavity preparation and you can put something on that'll stick forever, do you really need to do 5 years at a university to be able to do that sort of thing? And that's the argument that's going to be used against us.
Yeah, and
I'm afraid.
I think part of this comes from what you say. We do have materials that we didn't have before, and I think the manufacturers are leading us down the path, trying to tell the young one, this is the easy, quick way to do it. You don't have to do it, just pop it in.
And it lasts for all time.
Yeah, pop it in and it pops right out. I do a little teaching myself in operative dentistry, and whenever I'm on the clinic floor, I still require my students to make a preparation, even if they're going to pop in one of these so-called adhesive materials. We prepare it so it's going to be held mechanically as well as bonded, and they work a lot better. We're doing quite a research project there at the university on on the composites particularly in there, we're finding there's quite a bit of micro leakage, so haven't beat alloy yet.
I'm quite sure that the time will come when the young people will wake up to the fact that the decision that they've made of recent date is wrong. But it's like Niagara Falls. When it's just a trickle, if you can put in a few planks of wood and make a little dam at the end, you're pretty right. But once the falls are in full flood, you've got no chance of stopping it at all. And I can see this carrying over much further into the same. And of course, it's like the big argument that's going on in Australia and elsewhere at the moment regarding narcotics. So you've got this large group of shaggy-haired, ill-kept people saying, make narcotics free, and then there'll be no excuse for anybody to steal your purse so they can buy it. So theft has gone out the window. You don't need the police anymore, and everything's rosy because everybody's just lying around the street in a narcotic state, which is normal according to them. And people are listening to these arguments, and that's the sad part of it. And just the same as I'm quite sure that some of these people might have to give up their second car and not have a larger boat, and or get their house within, and even send back their plastic cards.
That'd be the downfall. Right along this line we were talking, you made a statement here about ethics and professionalism, and about teaching that at the undergraduate level.
Well, I have a belief that just as when you were a kid on your mother's knee, she taught you what was right or wrong. You didn't know this automatically.
That's right.
It is good if you do this and you get satisfaction out about it, and so the recipient gets benefit. But if you do that, that's wrong, and that's wrong because it's bad for you and it's bad for the recipient. To me, it's the same way in a profession. I don't think you automatically learn ethics, and I think ethics should be taught. And what's wrong with it? I noticed this, as a matter of fact, I was asked to give an occasional address at Sydney University, the only second time that they'd asked a dentist to do it, because apparently mine and the previous ones are such disasters they haven't done it since. I did point out the fact that the universities were quite prepared to train people how to perform various operations which would permit them to assist the government in their own discipline, assist the population in their own discipline. But having done that, they're very loath to teach you how you bring this into effect. And the business relationship of having to conduct a practice with all the problems relating to the business side of a practice was out the window as far as they were concerned. Whereas in Northwestern University, when I went there, A.D. Black ran the program himself on practice administration. And the figures that he'd collected due to the various surveys which he'd done for the government and the American Dental Association on incomes from various practices at various levels of certain types of communities, large, small, big cities, small cities, and so on, and the effect all that had on practice, so that somebody going into practice could go in with their eyes open and not just go in and find it out to their own detriment or to their own benefit, if hopefully, after they'd got into it. But it fell on deaf ears. The faculty didn't rush around and put any lecturers on in ethics, and I complained about the ethical situation because I thought the lack of teaching of ethics was the thing that directly led to the materialism which is developed in the profession, which I think even those that practice it realise it's wrong.
We're wrestling with that same problem right now at the University of Oklahoma and trying to integrate into this course a true, honest, basic, good ethics program and professionalism. As you say, they have to be taught, and they're influenced by too many outside influences, the money being one of the things.
Well, ethics is tied up with law, and while we still have a course in dental jurisprudence, the teaching of the law in relationship to dentistry is not, in my mind, put over to the side where you behave yourself because it's a good thing to behave yourself, and if you don't, the law's over your shoulder making sure that you'll pay for your misdemeanour. So that while we do admittedly have courses in dental jurisprudence, it's only virtually how you behave in the requirements of the Dentist Act in a particular state. It doesn't really teach you an ethical approach to things. But I do know that various colleges in the United States have taken up this catch-cry of ethical behaviour and condemnation of materialism. And I've read many of the papers prepared, and I've heard many a presentation at college meetings, and I'm impressed by the knowledge and understanding of those that are trying to pass on the good word to their fellow practitioners.
It's another challenge, and along that line, what do you think some of the other major challenges for dentistry today? Marketing and advertising and...
It worries me a little bit. Things come and things go. You remember there was a time where you'd have white sound and you put on earmuffs and nearly blew your eardrums from one side of your head to the other, and that was to stop you having pain in the teeth that you were drilling up here. And then when a few people went to court and complained about their hearing loss as a result of this, they gave that away. That was the end of that one. Then in comes another microscopically small but significant thing at the time, fad, and they come and they go. There's nothing that can match the relationship between the dentist and his patient who have rapport.
Right.
And if you say to this patient, I'm going to do this, and it might worry you for a moment, but if you can just bear for a moment, that'll be it, and then there'll be no more discomfort. Or would you like me to give you an injection and feel nothing whatsoever and have a lip like this for the next 45 minutes? I must admit that in my practice, I use anaesthesia much less than most of my confrères who automatically reach for a syringe. As a matter of fact, I think I taught a rather good lesson to at one stage, and until I retired, I was an examiner for the master's degree, and we had a student who had been practicing in England under the National Health Scheme and had come back to Australia theoretically to do his examination for his master's degree, but we knew it was to absolve himself from military service. And his co-examiner was a very great friend of mine, a man who had a great influence on me, Brigadier Finney, with whom I worked very closely during and after the war. And he said, I think, well, we might teach this young fellow a lesson, Gordon. And I said, all right. So he said, what will we ask him to do? And I said, well, let's get him to prepare, make a restoration in this particular upper premolar. And we both agreed for that, and then I was the first one to see the case after he'd done his little bit. And when it came along, and I came along, I said to him, did you test this tooth for vitality before you started? And he said, no, I didn't. I said, well, do it now. He said, I can't. And I said, why can't you? He said, I've given the patient an injection. I said, do you mean to say you gave an injection not knowing whether the tooth was vital or not before you did it? I think you need a little more practice. He came back a year later. I'm sure he tested every tooth in that head for vitality before he even scaled the teeth.
That sounds like you. Yeah. Oh, that's good. That's good. I'll have to remember that one. Oh, me. Well, I'm still laughing on that one. You were involved in many organizations closely related to dentistry. And one that I'm most familiar with, and being associated with you personally over a number of years, as attested to by what we're wearing in our lapels, is the International College of Dentists. And I understand your beginning in that was, I mean, really getting involved. You were already involved, but you were upgraded a little faster than normally when a good friend of yours, Dr. Granger, passed away. And coincidentally, I know I'm not the one being interviewed, but I must tell you just this little anecdote. One of the beginnings of this interview that we're doing with International College, our AV history, kind of started with young David Granger. Dick Adelson that you met taped David when he was at the University of Florida. And at the end of the tape, he said, well, Dr. Granger, he said, we've had a good interview, said we'll meet about 10 years from now and see if all these things you've predicted have come true. Well, of course, he passed away. We know that. And that was one of the inspiring things that got us interested, and we got our grant from the college and began doing these interviews so that we could capture the wonderful things that you men have done for dentistry throughout the world. Now, I just throw that in, but so you started with...
a little anecdote about David. After the war, and I won't go into the history as to why so many people went to England post-war. It's a story in itself, and it's worth telling at some stage. But a great number went, and in the early 60s there were 611 Australian dentists practicing in the United Kingdom under the National Health Scheme. And we only had 3,000 dentists in the whole of Australia. So that was an inordinately large percentage of the number. And I don't blame them for it, because the government was had a very poor response to recommendations that I made to the government when I was then the treasurer of the Australian Dental Association, that they make money available at low interest rates to allow these people who they'd already trained at the university and paid for them at the university to get themselves into practice, and the government wouldn't do it. And of course there was no way that they had no collateral, they couldn't borrow money, and there were wonderful stories coming out of the United Kingdom about how well some of these were doing, and they were doing very, very well, some of them. I won't go into the standards or anything else at the moment. But when you mentioned David Granger, David Granger was one of a year in which there were 32 graduates, and there were only 2 of them who hadn't booked their fares to London before their final examination.
Oh, man.
So the total net result from graduating 32 for that year was 0, which was very odd. And the reason why they weren't is because they were both going to Northwestern. So they both went to Northwestern, and David came back and worked with Alan for a while, and then he was married to a very lovely young lass from Chicago, and they lived in Australia for a while. Then they had the opportunity to go back to Florida, and he was given this very fine job, and I was honoured to have a copy of the first booklet he wrote on operative dentistry when he was head of the department, and I saw him at a meeting in the United States when he'd grown this fungus, which I ribbed him about a little bit. I hardly knew him, as a matter of fact. He walked up and spoke to me before I realised it was David. But David was one of the best students we've ever had, and he made his own mark in dentistry, but it's getting away from it a little bit. In 1956, I was made a Fellow of the American College of Dentists, and that stage it was a kind of a real super honour title in Australia, and there were only about 8 of us in the whole of Australia that were made Fellows of the American College. And then the International College started expanding its influence, and a number of people had been involved in it. One was Gilbert Henderson, an oral surgeon from West Australia, and Alan Granger, who was also lecturing at the University of Sydney in ceramics and had a private practice in Sydney. That was David's father.
Yes.
And they were called then regents in the days of Westerdale, when Westy was the registrar of the college. And a number of people were appointed, and it wasn't until 1961 that it was realised that I wasn't a member of the college. And somebody started making questions around the place. Why isn't Gordon a member of the ICD? And they said, well, he can't be a member of the ICD and a member of the American College at the same time, which was a bit of a myth that somebody had started. And when it was found out that the fact that you'd had a previous relationship with the American College of Dentists, which didn't debar you from fellowship of the International College, I was invited to join. And then we had a meeting in Western Australia, and we were presented with a charter, and Alan and Gilbert Henderson were asked to get together on it and do something about getting the college organised in Australia. But there was a bit of personal conflict of interest as to who was going to be boss, and virtually nothing happened to about 1970, and that Gordon Agnew had come out, and the very fine man that he was gave a wonderful speech in Perth and gave us our charter. So in 1970 we had a meeting up in Brisbane, and we got to forming a formal body, and it wasn't an autonomous section at that stage, but it then became one. And Alan was made the president, and I was made vice president, and the Honourable Derek Freeman, now a member of the Order of Australia, he was made the secretary, and he provided for us a constitution which was totally unworkable, unfortunately, and we couldn't really implement it. But it did have one provision in it, was that in the event of the president being unable or unwilling to continue, the vice president carried on. And Alan succumbed to a very painful and debilitating illness that he'd had. And when he passed on, I automatically became president of the section. At that stage we had 17 members. And we set about building up the membership in Australia quite definitively. We said, well, we're permitted to have about 2% of the population of dentists as fellows of the college, and we want to ensure that we don't have any predominant group running the college, such as specialists or public service people or so on. So we took the numbers of specialists, general practitioners, persons in the armed forces, in the public administration of dentistry, the academics and so on. And we worked out their percentage of the total overall dimension, and we figured out now to eventually approach a figure of about 200, we want X number of people from each of these various ones, so that we have a wide spread. And the people that came into the college came in by invitation only. There was never a suggestion at any stage that anybody could become a member if they asked to be made a member. In fact, that went against them if they did. So the result was that we finished up in Australia with what we'd call virtually the cream of dentistry in Australia, and including New Zealand. And when we had so many New Zealanders with it, it was on my suggestion that we make it the Australasian section of the college, that it was changed to Australasian. And then that carried on, and I did that for 7 years, and in the meantime it had been suggested to me that I might like to, I'd been, in the days of Roberto Roof, I'd been made what was eventually called an executive councilman, and I worked at that. In fact, I think I was 16 years past before I finished up in May of this year as an executive councilman, which was my last meeting which I attended in that capacity. And of course in the process I'd become a vice president, a president-elect and a president. And it was a very, very proud moment in my life when I suddenly realised the enormity of the responsibility that I had, about the honour that I also had in being the principal dentist of what I regard as the principal college of dentists in the world. And so I felt I should do something about it, and with Jean's help I decided that I'd go to every active section of the college in the world and promote the college and go to places in South America, for instance, where there were, in many of them, where we had no representatives of the college, and select individual people. And it was very fortunate that just at that stage I was doing a job for the Department of Immigration of the Australian government in relationship to selection of dentists who wanted to come from South American countries, and I was to do a survey of a number of dental schools in South America. So I did this through the embassies, so I got a direct input straight into dentistry from a very high level, and I met some of the finest dentists in South America that you can meet anywhere in the world. So I came back, and we went to every major country in South America, and of course we'd been to Canada and the United States that year, and to Mexico. Mexico had been lumped in with Guatemala and a few other Central American countries, and I suggested that they make it a separate one, which they agreed to. And then we even went to Spain and Morocco and a couple of other North African countries, Egypt, Iran, India, Pakistan, and of course Europe, in France and in England. And fortunately for the college, it was no impact on their finances, because in those days the president wasn't assisted in any way financially for what they did.
I thought you had a $100,000 travel allowance
well,
there.
Yeah, might have needed it, but it wasn't on. Fortunately, the president now gets some subsistence to allow him to carry out his duties, but in those days, and frankly, I'm very pleased that I didn't. It permitted me to be my own free man and do what I wanted to do, and you can't buy freedom. And being able to do what I wanted to do, when I wanted to do it, and at my own time, without feeling I was imposing on anybody, was a tremendous feeling of self-respect, if you'd like to call it that. So I wrote a long report, and when I came back and presented it at the meeting in Miami, and it was some of the suggestions I've made have been implemented. I even suggested that they start a section in South Africa, and after 10 years, I think something might come of that.
Yeah, I think it's still on the fire, on the back burner.
Well, I think it's getting closer to the front.
Right.
It's being moved up a couple of portfolios, a little bit closer to the front of the deal, which is a very sad situation, but I see no reason why attitudes should develop towards a country which influence our association with our own dental fraternity, no matter where it is in the world, no matter the colour of the person or the religion or the wealth or poverty of the particular individual concerned, because after all, this is what it's all about in my book.
Right.
If we're an international college, we just have to be international college. We have to be able to think big. And of course, some of the experiences which I've shared with you on various occasions over that visit were just really overwhelming.
There's one that you talked about that I think when you were in Pakistan, that was quite an interesting experience that you and Jean had. You might...
well, Pakistan was probably one of the most interesting. Of course, these parts of the world, like Pakistan and India, had never had a representative of the college, of any status within the college itself, visiting them officially. And of course, because it was the first time we had, people were introduced as fellows of the college. The chairman was the head of the Lahore University, the chancellor of the University of Lahore. The whole procedure was on television, colour television. We were treated, was funny, I was always referred to as Brigadier Rowell and Lady Rowell. Jean has always enjoyed it.
Sure.
Only place in the world she's ever gotten that. But we were treated wonderfully, and the fact that we were Christians didn't deter them from taking us into their homes where they had their Muslim rights, and of course it was at the time of Ramadan, which put them at a tremendous gustatory disadvantage. And the all in all, it was a wonderful visit, and we learnt some of the problems that they have in these countries that we don't appear to have, and it gave us an opportunity to help contribute to them.
Time has just gone by in such a hurry, and we've had such a delightful conversation. And we haven't touched on perhaps but about half of what you've done during your dental life over the past 51 years. But I do know that you were very instrumental in work with the Pierre Fauchard Academy in Australia and with the Fédération Dentaire Internationale in Australia. We have just a few minutes if you'd like to summarize some of the things you'd like to leave for history, Gordon. Why, please do so, because it's just magnanimous of everything that you've done and how one man could do so much in such a short period of time.
Well, do we just touch on the FDI for a moment? I became involved in the FDI in 1950 when, as Federal Treasurer of the Australian Dental Association, I became the first National Treasurer for Australia for the FDI. Then I was involved through the military to the Armed Forces Dental Services Commission of the FDI, which has had its name changed to the Defence Forces Commission, or the Commission on Defence Forces Dental Services. And I served on the Commission for about 16 years and was with the Commission itself for 6 and Chairman of the Commission for 3 years. And I'm proud to state that during that period of time I helped to assist the Commission being retained as an entity in the FDI. And if there's any one lasting monument that I'd like to be referred to relating to my service with the FDI was to stop the Armed Forces Dental, or the Defence Forces Dental Services Commission from being disintegrated, and which would have lost the direct access FDI has to every government in the world, and the opportunity for dentists of the armed forces in various parts of the world to come together at government-assisted or at government expense. And a tremendous amount of good has evolved from that commission, and I was very proud to be associated with it. As far as the Pierre Fauchard Academy is concerned, for many, many years coming to the United States, people like Murray Gavel would invite me to go along to meetings, and I remember one particular one in New York where we had a luncheon meeting at the Waldorf Astoria, and I was Murray's guest, and he suggested to me that I might like to become a fellow of the Academy, and I'd been accepted so many luncheon invitations I felt a cad if I didn't. So I was very, very happy to join the Academy, and I enjoyed what I was doing and the people that were involved with it, particularly when Clifford Loader became president and was wishing to expand the activities of the college. He arranged for me to be appointed the chairman for the Australian and New Zealand section, later become the Australasian section, which I did, and we carried on, and at that stage we had no formal, the Academy itself didn't have a constitution which permitted the formation of autonomous sections. So last year I had the Academy agreed to a constitution which I developed for the Australasian section, and a panel of officers. I was the sole responsibility for the Academy in Australia for 12 years, and in May of this year I relinquished that, and we had a new team of officers to come in, a new constitution, and now it's over to you.
Well, no, I just got a signal from one of our cameramen, and I did want to close this with a statement that you made and something I read. Even though you had many of these ideas and you were the president of everything in Australia, the Australian Dental Association, the Royal College of Surgeons, you were headed up so many things. You love to do constitution and bylaws. I know you've done 2 or 3 of those of different organizations. And Gordon Rowell has received many honors and many decorations, but you made a statement that I feel is most important, that you couldn't have done this without, and I'll let you finish.
Well, the close support of my confreres and those that believed in the same ideals that I hope to promote, and the tender, loving and helpful guidance of my good wife.
Right. Gordon, has been a delight. The time has passed so rapidly, we could probably sit here another 2 hours at least, and I've certainly enjoyed it, and I know this will be one of the outstanding tapes that we'll put in our library for history. And thank you so much for being with us.
It's a pleasure.
Yeah.